So I'll just do that. That way in the moving forward, people can come back and revisit the things that we talked about, because we are going to go through things sort of quickly in terms of, you know, the first few things. But there's a lot of questions that people had that we wanted to get to, because really it's probably why we're all here, is there's a lot of questions. So
yeah, we also want to just say there's a chat window. If you hover on the bottom, if you're on your computer, or it's on your phone at the bottom, little chat box. So, you know, we do wish, you know, for everyone to mute themselves while we're kind of chatting, but and then unmute as needed. But we would love if you could use the chat box, and that'll be easier for us to pull questions, more pointed to, you know, each slide we're on. And then, you know, with time allows, we'll get through as many as we can, and what we can't, we will ask Paula and Kim to help us answer and get back to you all.
Yep. So, oh boy. So the agenda for tonight is we're going to talk a little bit more about DESE. Kim kind of talked about, you know, how helpful the site is and how much more organized it is now. I think especially with COVID, they've been doing a great job of keeping all of the special ed stuff more accessible. So we'll just talk a little bit more about their things that they've put in place for COVID and the upcoming school year. And then IEPs, we'll talk about the, you know, how that works with remote and hybrid learning, the mini hybrid model that Leominster put out, and talk about, maybe answer some questions about that. Compensatory services, students and inclusion, technology, busing, and then we can open it up to any more follow-up questions or thoughts or compliments or whatever it is that people want to say. So we'll go right into it. I can't seem to get this to work. So the first thing is DESE Guidelines. So this, basically every week, the commissioner puts out updated information, but ultimately this is what they provide to school districts and moving forward in the, you know, for the fall year. I think it was sort of agreed upon that in the spring, everybody was kind of running around not knowing really how to handle this and what to do, and putting into place some sort of a temporary learning environment, which I think is more considered the resources model, which we did, I think, more in the district. But moving forward, DESE says that, you know, even if our school district is operating in a hybrid model or a remote model, that administrators, educators must make every effort to provide up to full-time in-person instruction. And this is for the population of students that we have. These are kids with disabilities, younger children, younger students, that they are to be prioritized for in-person instruction, which is what the district did when they came out with their mini hybrid plan. And then, you know, this is the big one. If in-person instruction can't be provided, students that receive special education must basically get FAPE, which is free and appropriate public education, through the instruction services model of delivery, which is different than what we saw in the spring and the summer. That's the big important thing, is how this will look, the school year ahead will look different. And so DESE tells us, you know, some ways that could be. And you can visit, again, we talked about the website. These are FAQs. These take and consolidate all the most important parts, all the questions that, you know, answers, any feedback they've gotten from special ed directors, and all of that gets compiled, and it's sort of a quick way rather than having to navigate around the site. So we highly recommend using that link, just to see sort of what's coming from the top down and what to expect to happen in the district. I think I get this part too, right? Yes. Yes. Okay, so this is a big one too. Again, that IEPs must be fully implemented, and regardless of the location. So, you know, before maybe we had, it will look very different in the fall. So, than it did in the spring. And it doesn't matter where they're located, whether they're at home or in a mini hybrid, their IEP services must be implemented. If anything should change, or if anything is going to be different than what is written in the IEP, parents should receive a letter or something in writing describing how it's going to look different, in details, like who will be providing services, when will that happen, much more detailed than just a plain email. And then, the DESE has asked and districts to basically include parent input, because we've been with these kids since March. So that information is going to be important moving forward to any, changes to their IEP, which we will talk about, any new things that might have come up, and things like that. So parent input is going to be really important. I know I've heard the district say that. So parents listening, make sure that you are, communicating the needs of your child. And this is the fun part, the timelines. So the basics, things that you probably will need to know, is that for example, my son was in the middle of an eval, and it was disrupted because of COVID. So anyone that was in the middle of an evaluation, I believe it starts the first day the kids go back, so the 14th. Once the kids go back, the clock starts ticking and they have as much time as was left over. So say they had 2 more weeks to complete any evaluations, they will then start the clock on the first day of school for the kids. And then they will have 2 weeks to complete the evaluations and move forward with the timeline. New evaluations, we believe they will be, that will not change. So any of the timelines, going with the new evaluations will be the same as they normally would be. IEP meetings will start to be held to determine compensatory services, which Bonnie's going to talk about in a minute. That's really important. And one of the things that we were kind of wondering, and actually there's a few parents that I've talked to, early intervention transfer. So early intervention services, for some of you that might have a child in early intervention, they extended services until October 5th or 15th. I can't remember which one. So those kids got more services because they knew schools couldn't handle any of the new incoming kids. Just there's a lot going on. So they extended the services until October for kids that had turned 3 between March and August, I believe. So one of the things that maybe we could ask is, what is the thought in terms of a timeline for those students, incoming students from early intervention?
Yeah, I'd love to jump in.
Sure.
About some of that. I'm probably going to ask Mary to help me a little bit more about the early intervention because she's the coordinator for early childhood and she's sort of been standing in front of those questions. But I did want to just jump back a little bit to what you first started to talk about with the evaluations. And of course, that's true. We didn't really have a plan on how to evaluate students in the spring. And so there were a few things that we did, but overall, we are just like every district. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a couple of SPED directors today, and we're all in the same boat. Most of our schools have about 50 evaluations that they're starting the school year off that need to be completed. Our attorney we've talked to, because there's just no way that we're going to meet those timelines. We're out of compliance, and the district, the DESE knows that, and they're asking us in good faith to make sure that we're prioritizing to get those evaluations done. We've learned a lot over the summer about what evaluation can look like remotely. I think that our students that we already know that we've already done evaluations on, this is going to be an opportunity for us to partner with parents to say, listen, I think we have the data that can really tell us whether your child really still needs access to special education and to a modified curriculum, but we might want to do it a little bit differently. And with parent agreement, that's what we'd be thinking about. One of our biggest challenges right now, and all districts are having this challenge, is we are down a school psychologist. And so nobody's applying. And everybody's having the same issue. So I did some brainstorming today with some SPED directors about how we can help each other out wherever there's holes as to where their evaluations have needs, and then Leominster can kind of look and see what our needs are. We're very fortunate because we do have a few consulting psychologists that we work with that do a really nice job. and have been doing some teletherapy and some assessments over the summer. So I think we're actually going to learn some things from them, and they're going to be able to help us get those evaluation. Our goal is, starting now, is anything new, we want to start to hit those timelines again, get back. We love hitting our timelines. We had our a mid-cycle review this year, and one of the things that we had to do in our self-study was to show when we got consent and what did the timeline look like as far as when we were meeting with parents. And you know, it just looked great on paper. So right now we're feeling a little stressed that we don't look as good as we did last year. But that's number one on our agenda. And we certainly are going to continue to take parent requests. I've actually had a few parents that were kind of timid about that and asking me, maybe this isn't a good time to ask for an evaluation. It's still the parent's right to tell us their concern. We're not going to put those things on hold. We're going to work with them to figure out how we can best assess their child. Mary, maybe you can jump in and talk a little bit about the early childhood.
Sure. My apologies if the puppy jumps into the screen again. He's a little wild right now, but we do have about 50 evaluations that are pending from last year. We spoke with all the parents. Some of them wanted to do virtual and we were able to do those meetings. Some decided to wait for their evals. So we do have a list of all the pending ones with the due dates. We're going to do our best to get those in. I've already met with the teams. They've given me evaluation schedules for the preschool. And then for the EI referrals that have been coming in, I've been talking to parents as they come in, and then consents won't start going out until the first day of school. So we'll start those, and as those consents come signed, they'll go onto the evaluation schedule as well. So we are ready to start with remote, and whenever we can do more than that, we'll be ready to go with that too, because the schedule's already set.
Great.
Okay.
Kim,
Yeah,
can I ask you a question? Is there a way that you can have the coordinators maybe survey parents real quick to see if anybody wishes to defer? So you can move the priorities around. You know, I'll use myself as an example.
No?
My daughter is moving to a completely new school. She's going to have familiar people, but I don't think you're going to get a true sense of her if you stick her in the building and you try to test her and finish her 3-year eval. So I'm willing to defer and say, you know, let's give it a good month and a half, you know, because it doesn't make any sense. And I would certainly want also to give you the opportunity to get somebody who has a higher need. You know, so maybe my daughter's more complex and high needs in that, in one sense, in terms of how she's a learner. But I don't think she's as dire need of an evaluation. Do you know what I'm saying? So
yeah, we actually have had some parents who've had a similar conversation than we're having right now and have said the same thing, or have even said, listen, I'm very happy with the plan that we have right now. I still want to have an IEP meeting this year, but I'd like to move their evaluation to next year.
okay.
So
should parents just email you?
If parents want that and they agree to it, we are happy to. Believe me, we're happy about it.
So I guess the avenue is, what's the best way? Do we email you and the coordinator, just the coordinator?
Yeah, parents can contact us, but we are also reaching out to families, especially in the spring when we had evaluations that were coming up. We were talking to parents, and we were giving them that option to waive the evaluation. So we will continue to do that.
Okay, great. Sorry, I cut you off. I know you were going to say more, I think.
Nope, I'm good.
Yeah, so there's a lot, as you can tell, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of pressure on the school side. You know, I think from a parent's perspective, and I'm hoping like schools understand this too, is that, you know, I think with our population, we kind of understood, and I think we kind of allowed wiggle room for you guys to figure things out, and just to, you know, as things changed, and just to kind of, you know, sort of learn this new normal, if you will. So I think there needs to be cooperation from parents, but also on the other side too, where, you know, we are now 5 months of a, you know, no therapies for our kids, and no, you know, whether it's private therapies or whatever. So, you know, there's a lot going on in the homes, and there's a lot of stress there too. So I think it's a good idea to reach out to parents to kind of feel for who's kind of okay with, and then that might free up obviously a lot more, and prioritize those kids that need the evaluation sooner rather than later. But But which kind of, you guys kind of answered the question, which is how will meetings and evals be conducted during remote mini hybrids? Is there enough staff to provide the services and conduct the evaluations? I guess that's a separate question that someone had. Yeah, so does someone want to answer that? Is there enough staff to provide services and conduct evals and meetings during the regular week?
That's a lot, yeah.
Yeah, I think we will definitely going to be using a little bit more of our consulting team than we probably have in the past, just so that we can meet that. It's really going to be better for everybody if we use some of those resources, because our staff, we need them to be healthy and we need them to not be so stressed, because you can imagine our staff works really hard when they do their evaluations. They're nice evaluations. We're really proud of the work that they do, and we want them to be able to continue to do that. So we're going to try to take some of that stress off of them. I actually had a speech therapist who has decided from another district to stay home because of COVID, and she has 2 little ones, but she has daycare 1 day a week and would like to do some testing. So I'm going to grab her and I'm going to have her do some assessments and just take some of those things off of people's plate. We want the assessments to be meaningful. And, you know, it's still, we still have to think about what's going to drive that discussion and what's going to drive those IEP goals. So I do think that we'll probably be using some of more of those resources. It's very interesting because last year, because we weren't using a lot of consulting, you know, I have a little bank of funds to be able to do that. So I feel very fortunate that we are going to be able to start our year off with those additional supports.
I just want to jump in a couple questions that actually relate to this slide, Stephanie, if you don't mind.
Sure, go for it.
So one parent just wants to sort of, I guess it's also kind of a question. It turns into a question. If a child does not do well with computers and remote learning in general, you know, evaluations have to be in person. I'm assuming that's a case by case, and you will be able to accommodate those in-person evals. I believe I heard you say that already.
Yep, we're planning to do in-face evaluation. We're going to do a combination. I think especially for that reason right there, a student who's just not going to be, you know, just not going to get a good evaluation through remotely. I think that especially the initial evals too, where we may not really know the student, those students would be students that we would want to be face-to-face with as well. I've been going to a few meetings from out of district where they have done a lot of the remote testing with even some kids who have some high challenges, and it's really quite impressive what the team meeting has looked like and what kind of data they've been able to bring for the team to look at. And I think the reason that were so successful in those settings was that there was a lot of parent input. You know, they really they did a lot of interviews with parents, they got some checklists from them, they talked with them about what the evaluation results were going to look like, so parents came to the meeting pretty informed, and they went quite well. So I think we've learned a few things. But you know, even for some of those students face-to-face, some parents may not want to do that, and we'll talk about what that can look like. Maybe that's a kid that we do defer for a while. Maybe it's a student that we at least try to do a virtual assessment, and then we can make some recommendations.
And then one parent is asking, are all kids on IEPs getting evaluated in the fall by teachers, or is it strictly the kids whose evals were disrupted?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the question's asking. Anybody who's due for a 3-year reeval, there definitely will be talking to those families.
Right. So I mean, we're not just you're not just saying every kid needs a new IEP, and that sort of rolls into the compensatory in a way. So I think we'll kind of defer the question to the compensatory, because I know that maybe is part of that question. Right. You know, maybe, you know, it's the identifying, you know, who needs compensatory and how you determine that fact.
And I think the compensatory conversation is difficult right now because we still haven't had a lot of training ourselves. Our lawyer is doing a training with myself and all of the coordinators on October 2nd to talk to us about what that language looks like, what kinds of data we should be collecting, what kinds of conversations we should be having with teachers and with parents. Because really the compensatory line is not going to happen until we are back fully. However, we are going to be talking a little bit about COVID impact services, and it may not necessarily be something that goes into the IEP, but it might be, we might have a student that we're thinking you know what, we've got to bump some services up right now. I think where we're sitting right at this moment, we want to think about when students start next week, the data that we're going to be collecting so that we can make those kinds of decisions. We of course have some data because teachers were seeing students, but it's just going to look different as we start in September. And so really understanding where students were in March and where students are now in September. So I think those conversations are certainly going to come up, and we certainly are going to know the students that we're the most concerned about. And those are the students that the commissioner is asking us to really try to, before December, making sure that we're having meetings around those issues and those students of concern.
Okay, great.
Okay, accommodations. So this sort of, I think, brings us into the compensatory discussion again. So I guess we can revisit it, but it just basically says that the question was, how will new accommodations be determined? And I can't see around that word, to support remote learning demands, new technology, attending to tasks, navigating the curriculum, those types of things. So are these accommodations that need to be added? That, I guess, is the question.
Right. So I think we start with the accommodations that the student currently have been recommended, but you're right. Now that students are sitting in a different place and using different kinds of tools, we certainly probably are going to want to think about, you know, are there additional things that we want people who are working with that student to consider? And so, you know, that can be a very quick conversation where a teacher is saying, listen, with this particular student, I found that I've been experimenting with these few accommodations and it's making a huge difference for them. I want to make sure that it's documented somewhere, and may call the parent and say, and we don't have to pull the whole team together, but I'd like to add these additional accommodations to your child's IEP. I'm going to go ahead and amend it if you're okay with it. Because we're making an amendment, we don't have to pull the whole team together if it's just something like adding an accommodation or, you know, moving something to, you know, more services like increasing speech or decreasing speech. We might just want to have a conversation about that. But I think you're right. I think some of that is going to bubble up as we are working with our students.
I just want to add, I think that some of this actually involves an OT in some cases where,
Agreed.
you know, the accessibility portion, whether it's an iPad or whether it's a laptop, you know, there are risers that kids might need, or different types of a mouse, you know, there's all kinds of things that I think, you know, as long as the teachers know that, you know, we have OTs. I know everyone's stretched thin, but I'm sure you're going to have like a basic toolbox eventually. Like this is going to be our new normal for a little while.
Yeah.
You know, I see it in my own workplace. You know, everybody has a different mouse. Everybody has a different keyboard. Not a lot of people can work right from the Chromebook. So there are some risers that, you know, the laptop can sit on and they can connect a remote keyboard. I'm thinking along those lines when I see new technology and attending to task. You know, so I think parents can kind of think outside the box. There's a lot of resources online too to kind of Google and get ideas and then have a nice, healthy conversation with the district.
Yeah, and we're partnering with CAPS Collaborative too. They have a new assistive technology staff member who is actually going to be consulting with us quite a bit, and they can do it remotely. So it's perfect. They're going to be able to look in on a Google Classroom, make an observation, make recommendations. I also know in my last district, sometimes we would use a checklist with additional accommodations on it, and rather than, you know, having to do everything so formal as far as maybe making that amendment or pulling the team together, saying to families, we would like to make these recommendations for these additional accommodations, and checking them off and getting parents' consent and adding that to the IEP. So I think what we want to be thinking about is, you know, we don't want people to be waiting around for those things. As it is, people are going to go into a lot of meetings. That's what we're trying to schedule and think about. And so any way that we can get something faster to students and do it in a way that's meaningful, we're going to be considering those steps.
All right, great.
And the last question here is, I think for the kids, like I'll talk about my own experiences with like a separate classroom where these are kids that, you know, need that one-on-one assistance in person, never mind remotely. So what are options that would be available to parents where they can have assistance? Are the tutors going to be able to assist remotely or in person, maybe even outside of those mini hybrid days?
So as we're looking at our tutor schedules now, and I'm going to let Lindsay jump in a little bit too, because she does supervise and has done a lot of training with the tutors in our district. But and she's thought really deeply about what, especially our ABA classrooms look like that have tutors supporting students. But I think it's going to depend on what's going to work best for the student. And we've got at least a little bit of that information about what's worked and hasn't worked for students. And I think it's going to look different for each student. Obviously, if the kids are coming for the micro-hybrid, there'll be tutors there to support them. I think in some situations, the tutor may be in the Google Classroom and prompting students. It's such an awkward way to do it sometimes. When students have a one-on-one, we always try to do it in a way that doesn't really make the student stand out. We always talk to our tutors about, you know, making sure that it looks like they're there for all students. And it's just really important that we don't want anybody to feel singled out. So I think for some students who might be really aware and that might feel awkward to them, that might be a student who has some one-on-one time with the tutor outside of that Google Classroom to get their support and get their prompts. So I think it's going to look different for each student depending on their needs. But Lindsay, I don't know whether you want to jump in about
Sure.
some of the recommendations you've made.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi.
Hi, everyone else. So I'll speak specifically to the substantially separate ABA classroom initially with the students who require that discrete trial type of instruction. And I want to make sure that I acknowledge we as an ABA team know how difficult it is to get your child onto the Zoom or the Google or the teletherapy and attending. It's just a whole different beast when it comes to capturing their attention, making it exciting, being able to provide a lot of reinforcement. So my goal, and I've been meeting with the substantially separate teachers the last couple of weeks and the tutors, is to provide an increase in face-to-face time than we did in the spring. I mean, in the spring, this was sort of, we thought we were going home for 2 days and then we didn't go back for the rest of the year. So we've had more time to plan. The goal is certainly to have much more face-to-face time with either the teacher or the tutor to target those IEP objectives to the extent that the child is going to tolerate. So we want to build on whatever tolerance they currently have. For example, if you don't mind if I use your son, maybe we work with him for 20 minutes, that's all he can tolerate. Maybe we come back in a little while and we do some more instruction later in the day and we fill that gap with some asynchronous activities. Like Kim said, it's really going to be individualized, but our goal is to, as best as we can, sort of mimic what we would be able to do in the substantially separate classroom as best we can. So to answer your question, certainly, we would definitely be able to assist those students with that sort of significant learning need, that discrete trial type of thing that they need. And then for students who are in an inclusion setting, that tutor would be part of the general classroom ELA lesson with some prescribed times to have more individualized support from an ABA tutor otherwise.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's see what we got now. Okay, so there was a bunch of questions about this. So I guess we'll start with the first one. What do the mini hybrids look like in terms of staffing, and is current staffing set for the year?
So as far as staffing goes for right now, so in the mini hybrids, we've taken a classroom and split them in half. Some are coming Monday, Tuesday, some are coming Thursday, Friday. So when you think about if all those kids were together, you might in one particular classroom, you might have 5 extra support staff depending on the needs. And obviously in the smaller group, we're just not going to need as much staff with those those mini hybrids, because in one classroom, there's literally going to be 5 students that are going to be there. And so I think that when we say it's current staffing for the year, no. As we come across kids that have higher needs, or we're finding that as students are coming back to us that they need additional support, we're certainly going to go back to identifying what that support's going to look like. But we feel really good about what our classrooms are looking like right now. Next week, I'm actually going to be going with the nurse to each one of the schools that are going to be supporting those micro-hybrids and meeting with the staff, the tutors, the paras, the teachers, the principals, and looking at the classrooms, making sure they have everything that they need, and then answering their questions around support and what it looks like. And, you know, we're going to have constant communication about what's working and not working. So I wouldn't say it's set for the year, but I think we're starting off with something that we feel really good about. And as far as the specialists, we're good. The psychologists are the ones, like I said earlier, are our area of need. But as far as speech and PT and OT, we've got our speech assistants, we have our CODAs. We actually do a little bit of consulting work with Keystone Collaborative, and they'll be providing all of our PT services. So we have lots of staff to be able to cover all of those service deliveries. You can't imagine, the PTs are getting so excited to see the kids. They're like, you have no idea how hard it is to do physical therapy remotely. But they have been so creative, and families have actually given us some feedback about, wow, you know, this video really was helpful, this feedback was helpful, but they're just so anxious to see their kids and to see how things are going.
Yeah. For example, like for the mini hybrid, this was a question that I kind of felt, you know, it kind of hits home in terms of my own situation. So like my son's class last year had, we'll say 14 kids. I think there were 8 or 9 tutors in addition to a teacher. And it looks like this year, I want to say there's only 3 tutors. And I know in his classroom in particular, you know, there are some kids that will need one-on-one. So you take away a tutor. It's like, so my concern as a parent, you know, is that I know my son, I know what he needs. And if he's in a class with 7 kids during a mini hybrid and 3 tutors, it just doesn't seem like enough. Do the teachers feel confident that they can make things work? As a parent, I worry about that. And I know other people have reached out and kind of shared the same feelings.
Right. So you know, the other piece is that when we're looking at those numbers of kids, what we're learning, we started out with the number of staff that we felt was really good to be able to support those classrooms. And what we're learning is some kids are not coming. Some parents have decided, you know, we're starting the year off, our child is going to be home. Some parents have decided to maybe homeschool for a little while for different reasons. So the numbers may not be as high. So I feel confident that the people who helped support those classrooms and gave us feedback around what those students need, that we're starting off with the staffing that's appropriate. But we certainly, as we'll take feedback from teachers and take feedback from parents if that's not working.
Okay, thank you. Who is the specialist covering our assistive technology and augmentative communication?
So that's our person from CAPS Collaborative that we have. And we also last year started using Cotting School, who also is going to be available to do some remote assistive technology. And they actually are very good with augmentative communication. That's really their specialty. I've been working with them for a while. They actually did quite a few assessments for us last year in Leominster. So they know our community. They know some of our schools. And so we definitely have people on board who can support that.
Okay, Bonnie, do you have any questions from the chat? I kind of see it lighting up. I don't know if it's anything that pertains to...
A lot of them pertain to the next few slides, so I think we'll just defer them and move on.
Yeah. Mini hybrids, or you call them micro hybrids.
Yep, well, either one's fine.
Okay. So what I did was I took a picture poorly, so sorry, but it's the only thing I could find of something I received in the mail. Now, Bonnie, did you want to, I can't remember what we split,
Sure, so,
we split it all.
Yep, so I'll take over.
Sure.
And it won't be that long because I think we have more questions than, and people have more questions for, I think, Kim and staff. So, like Stephanie, I also got the same schedule because my child is in one of these cohorts. And so, Kim, you presented this sort of at the last, I think, school committee meeting and the one prior, where we're split up into 2 different cohorts, and then these are sort of the schedules here, and then you have those specialized service clinics, and correct me if I'm wrong, but those are for the kids who are not in the mini hybrids, who
Correct.
need the specialized services, who are remote. So you'll be bringing those kids in that 12:30 to 3 blocks.
Correct.
Yep.
Yes, right now what's happening is all of those related service providers are identifying the students that they feel that they have the highest needs, and we'll be reaching out to those families first.
Okay, so what's the timeline on that? Because I know parents always feel so much better when they have a timeline, because if they don't hear it, then they wonder, am I part of that? Am I not part of that? When will I hear? And I think you sort of bring everyone off of like Mach 10 down to a more mutual level. When would they expect to sort of hear about that being rolled out? I mean, that's not starting until October 5th, right? Or, but when would parents, start to hear that, or who should they talk to if they have questions, if they're part of that cohort?
So if they're part of the clinics.
Well, both. If parents, I mean, I'm assuming people who were in the micro-hybrids would have already heard.
They have.
But if they didn't and they thought they should be, we know there's always, glitches. They would reach out to you, right? Because or their coordinator.
Yep, and some families have reached out to us for sure. They've called our office, they've gotten in touch with the coordinators, or they've asked the principal if they've been confused about who they might ask. And so we've been able to give them some feedback. And I do believe that our related service providers really need another week to, I think about this a little bit. They want to see their students next week. I think by then we're going to be able to really get a handle on what that's going to look like in the afternoons, the phone calls that we're going to make. We've been trying to think outside the box as much as possible. For instance, our Northwest counseling staff really had some social skills groups that they wanted to continue, and they really want to bring those kids in and see them and have them in front of them. And maybe it's going to be 5 or 6 kids, and we know that maybe not everybody's going to be able to go. Moms and dads work, or there won't be a way for them to get there. And so the counselors were already thinking outside the box about, we'll have these 3 kids here, but the other 2 can join us remotely, and we can still have our social skills group. And so trying to think of ways that we might be able to extend that, even if a student couldn't come face to face, that there might be another opportunity. So I'm getting lots of ideas from my staff. They're the ones who are thinking about it. They're very, eager to have their students in front of them. So I think within the next weeks, parents will start to get contacted. Well, I'm going to have the service providers actually reach out and talk to those families themselves. Because really, in the end, even our speech assistants will be able to have a small caseload of students that they're going to be able to see as well, and our CODAs.
Okay. And parents have some questions about, how did you select, I believe you said it was 165 initially. What was the selection process for that?
Well, the feedback that we got from families, and the families that were really telling us that they were having the biggest challenges, were our students in our sub-separate. And so we knew that if we were opening the doors to anyone, it had to be to that population. And just looking at what other districts are doing too, I'm very fortunate. I belong to a wonderful cohort of 45 SPED directors, and we chat with each other and email each other about, about these things, about what is your district doing and what are you considering. And, I think we are all in agreement that these were the students we needed to see first. And then we have a plan for the next group of students. The superintendent talked last night about, we want to start thinking about those students with social emotional needs. We want to start thinking about those kids in resource room settings that would benefit from some face-to-face time. So we hope to be able to grow that. Of course, that all depends on the matrix and how things go. But I feel really confident just for the fact that we are walking into this better educated. We know what we're supposed to be doing to keep kids safe. I'm doing a little virtual tour of a school in Worcester that's working with some really disabled students to sort of see what is it, how are they managing their classroom? What does their classroom look like? What does the staff look like? What are some of the challenges they've had? So I'm having my BCBAs join me because they spend so much time in so many different classrooms or in so many different schools. So they're going to be able to spread the word a little bit about, hey, we saw when we were in this little virtual tour, we saw this great activity going on, or we saw this was a great way to keep children safe, or this was a great language that people were using with students. So they've had some great success. I want us to have the same success.
All right, great. So I have another question. So it sort of relates to a couple of parents' questions. So if my kid is in the cohort 1, what do I look like on Thursday, Friday? You know, am I going to have, I mean, the teacher is going to be teaching the students who are on site. So when does my child get teacher instruction and one-to-one time so it's synchronous on those other 2 days?
So I think it's going to look different for the different classrooms and the different needs, but I can share with you that I was over in the life skills classroom today and left there just like so excited for the kids because they really already had a plan. And they talked about what the morning activities were going to look like, that everybody was going to join them for the morning meeting, even the kids at home. So she said, as far as I'm concerned, we're all here. So the students would be joining that morning meeting, but then they'd be sent off with some tasks, with a checklist of activities that they needed to do, you know, she had a project every week for those students who were home, a project that they were supposed to do. And then in the afternoon, when these other students are leaving at after lunch or just with their lunch, then those teachers will have a short break and then they'll be getting online with those students. And they said, then we're going to be asking them, you know, you did your checklist. Let's talk about what you did. I want to see a picture of, you know, the activity that we asked you to do. I want to get online and see what kind of work you've done. So thinking about what that plan is going to look like, these teachers are really thinking outside the box about how they're going to manage that day. And she's been talking with parents about what the day is going to look like. I think, you know, I think one of the things that I was the most worried about was exactly what you're talking about, Bonnie. I was thinking, you know, what is that going to look like when the teacher's in the classroom working with students? What are those other students going to do? And teachers have plans for what that's going to look like. They're smarter than me, clearly. They've already got it planned.
Well, that's the idea of a leader, right? You've already set them up so they can independently think. And
Yep. And we're also doing, we're also going to be purchasing some additional technology. And so we're meeting with Teach Town tomorrow. I had my ABA teachers and life skills teachers do a workshop with them. They're going to be meeting with all of us tomorrow to talk about how we unroll that. So that will be a great tool that's going to be for students, resource that we didn't have last year. We're looking at Seesaw, another tool for our early childhood students. So I think that our technology resources are going to be much more improved and many more options. And what's nice about both of those is that even when we go back face to face, those are still tools that we're going to be able to use.
So sorry to jump in, but I'm thinking about my situation. Maybe it'll help others. So on Thursdays and Fridays, or let's go Monday and Tuesday, when my son isn't in his micro-hybrid, what have you told the teachers to do during that time? Are you just leaving it up to them, or is there something, you know, is there some kind of consistency from the district kind of top down? So what are they being told to do for those things?
So we do have a model that we've worked with teachers on over this PD time to talk about, because actually when I went in to talk to them about, or have talked to a few teachers about their plans, they really were thinking about what that model should look like and what kinds of activities they can have students doing. I think for our more specialized programs, you know, those teachers are the ones who know best how to service those students. Lindsay's been spending some time, and so have our ABA teachers spent a lot of time this summer thinking about what are some better ways that we can reach out to our students. I think one of the things that we were not, just didn't have access to, were for some of those students having the right technology for them. We didn't anticipate that we were going to need as much technology for all of our students. So we're very excited for the fact that we're going to be able to have some iPads, that we're going to be able to identify some students that are going to benefit from that, and what kinds of apps and tools. So I think those programs are so specialized, it's really asking those teachers what it is that they think that their students need. And our BCBAs have been very helpful about that too. I don't know, Lindsay, if you want to talk a little bit about some of the different models that you've been talking with the ABA teachers about.
Well, our goal is always to sort of increase as much independence as we can, but unfortunately without those kids in front of us right now, it's difficult to build those skills. Excuse me while I drop things. So on a case-by-case basis, for example, if we have a student who is somewhat independent at an activity schedule, that might be something that we utilize during those times when they're not in front of a teacher. But I also want to make sure that we keep the individual in the individualized education plan. And so when we are reaching out to those parents and getting their input for the individual learning plans that we are going to be sending out, that we ask realistically, if I'm not in front of your student at this time, what are some things that, you know, we think that he can do or she can do, and what is reasonable, and what are our expectations? So it's really a partnership between parent and teacher. We obviously don't want the parent to be the teacher, but we need that partnership. So I know the answer sounds vague, but I really want it to stay individualized. So I think we work with the skills that that child has, and then we build on those in the time that they're not in front of staff.
Yeah, I think it's just hard because, you know, we have typical students in the district who, as I've heard at least, that, you know, there's a very set schedule and how much FaceTime they have to have and when they need to be here and when they need to be there. And it just seems like, you know, and I don't know what the answer is, but, you know, when it comes to the micro-hybrids, it's certainly a start, you know, but in terms of the actual academic help that someone like my son, I think, you know, a lot of parents too that are in these micro-hybrids are in the same scenario. You know, their assistant, you know, once you take therapies out, so if he has an hour and a half of therapies a week and there's 6 hours of the mini hybrid or the micro-hybrid, that leaves 4.5 hours split 2 days. That's 2 hours and 15 minutes a day that he's getting what he needs. And, you know, 2 hours and 15 minutes, so 4.5 hours a week, where other students are getting, you know, hours and hours, and there's, you know, break off groups, and there's, you know, it's just like, how do we make this more equitable? And I know that we're trying really hard. And I know, you know, that the idea is to extend the time, in-person time. And I think one of the questions that we got, I don't remember if we put it in the slide, but it was a good question. And it basically was, what is the criteria that's going to go into, you know, determining when we expand the hours of in-person time? So right now, you know, it's 9:15 to 12. There's lunchtime in there. There's therapies in there. It's really not a lot. So at what point is it a health thing that we need to use as a determining factor? Like Charlie Baker, you know, we're in phase 1. What has to happen? Can we be sort of part of the conversation about what those phases look like? And maybe you've already talked about it and you have a plan, but is there a plan, and what is it? And can we know sort of what is going to happen and when?
So I don't know, Paula, if you want to jump in at
Sure.
all. I know that, you know, we do have some guidelines that we want to follow, and I can let Paula speak to some of that.
Yeah, so we work with our lead nurse. She really is our main lead on how we're doing as a community. Right now, our community looks good. We're watching the health metrics. It's going down and down. Right now is the time to get students in. We're not assured that when it becomes fall time. So we're using the state metric, the colored system of the white, the green, the yellow, and the red. That's just one determining factor. Kathy Gaudet checks the local growth of COVID daily. She reports to me every single morning and says, hey, listen, we're down by this percentage, we're up by this percentage. We have been going down consistently. We are a clean, good, we're a healthy community. Our issue right now is we need to stay there. So yes, we're scared to open the doors. We've had nobody in our buildings, nobody, for 6 months. We have kept those doors locked. We didn't let families in. We didn't let staff in. So now we just let in 1,000 people in staff. Now the first mini hybrid will be about 1,000 students. So, yep, I'm a little scared. So we are going to watch it daily. I am hopeful that, after 2 weeks, if it's holding and we're either going down or staying in the same area, we make a determination. We've promised our teachers union to come into the conversation as well, so that in early October, if it looks like we're holding, we need to bring our teachers back in and say, okay, we want to go to the next, I want a micro-hybrid. You know me, I just want to open the doors.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get there. I think we have been, I don't want to say over vigilant, but I think it's the right thing to do. So the Wednesdays, throwing in that cleaning day makes us feel better to say those days, every single one of those rooms will be disinfected. Every surface will be wiped down. Every vent will be looked at. Every door and window can be open. We talk about those little pieces like a door and a window being open. I don't want us to get away from our safety issues either. So on a Wednesday, there'll be nobody in those buildings. So clean away. On the weekends, no one's in there. So if we can hold for a good couple of weeks, we're gonna go. I wish we lived in an area that we could be outside more, because watching the meet and greets the last 2 days has been remarkable. It's just energized everybody again to say, okay, I think I can do this. Now we need to respect, our staff has the same anxiety level as our students and our parents and their parents as well. So we needed to get them back in the buildings to feel secure. And we're almost there, we're not 100%, but I think if we keep showing that we've got the right things in place, we're all gonna be okay. It's just, I really do wish I was Dr. Fauci or I had a magic 8-ball or something, I don't know. But November seems a long time for this to happen, but it could happen. I can't imagine us being in this for the full year, but I keep saying, what if, right? So we've got every contingency plan. Right now, we look good. So I say, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
So I hear from you saying, like, you're going to quickly pivot. That's what I'm hearing. It's
Quick.
like you're ready, you're ready to bounce to the next level. Obviously, you're going to see kids come in the door in these micro hybrids, and you're going to be able to see, the level of regression or the level of need. So I trust that, we're going to go off of parent input, teacher surveys.
Right, and we're taking a health survey every single day, and we need people to be honest with us.
Yep.
So if we want to get those doors open, even if your child does have that low-grade fever or that sniffles, just take the opportunity to get it checked out. People getting the flu vaccination, we have till December 31st to get that done. We want to do the right things, but I think we can pivot quickly. And if we're healthy, we need to pivot quickly. So with permission, we're ready to go whenever.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts on the mini hybrids or micro hybrids before we move on? I think the rest of these, so these were just some questions. Might have already hit on a lot of them.
The state today was talking about that first question, Steph.
Yeah, there it is.
They were, today when the state talked to us, they were telling us to look at a 2 to 3 week type of determination, really look for 10 solid days. So I would say that's more around a 2 or 3 week on the first question.
Okay.
And if kids cannot wear face masks, that's not an issue. I struggle with it. So we do have face mask breaks. It is not, some people think that their children would get in trouble for that. No, I mean, this is a new behavior. This is a new adaptation. We're actually teaching students and staff how to take a mask break, how to do it appropriately. We just had a safety video on what it should look like, what it shouldn't look like. And students are going to have accidents. So we have extra masks, and, you know, it's just, we're still human beings. So it is what it is. So we've put enough precautions in place that if somebody really needs a mask or can't, you know, just tolerate one, we're okay. We're okay.
Okay. Do you want to do the rest, Bonnie?
Well, let's see. So I think we already covered, will students be able to attend 3 or 4 days in other cohorts? That's something you're going to evaluate after the first few weeks.
Correct.
And see who needs what, when we're ready to move forward on that. And then will services be delivered outside of their academic time? I know that's true because my daughter, I already heard from her PT, so you know, not necessarily outside of their academic time, but you know, we already have like one remote service kind of set up.
Yeah, you know what, Bonnie, what would be really helpful from the CPAC side is one of the things we heard loud and clear back in the spring was that families were, for lack of better terms, they were over communicated to, and it got confusing.
Yeah.
That they were hearing from so many different service providers, and then it just became overwhelming and people kind of shut down. So I think we need to come up with a way to better communicate, because if you're a family with a child who gets OT or PT or speech or whatever, that's a lot. And that's a lot of different people. And it's hard for the family to manage. So I think thinking and helping us strategize a little bit, how do we make that easier? Should it come from one source if possible?
Yes.
It's calling
or is it a Google form?
Yeah, something like that. I think it's overwhelming. And I keep talking about, I've got this one mom with 6 children. It just floors me.
Yeah.
I keep saying, I'm sorry. So how would she manage that if she had 3 or 4 or 5 different calls per child every day? It's a lot, right?
Yep.
Okay, so we got to think about that.
Once a week meets would be helpful too. Because I know I have 3 children and it was overwhelming when I had everybody emailing me.
Yes.
But when I broke it down and I asked, hey, can you at least just email me and meet me once a week, like do a Zoom meeting or a group meet just once a week, that was a lot more helpful because I wasn't getting hounded by a bunch of teachers and specialists and sitting there being like, oh, okay, well, this is just way too much. And I have 3 children, 2 with IEPs, and I'm like, okay, I broke down crying. I was like, it's overwhelming. So it's like, I think breaking it down and at least having like just a weekly group meet or a Google meet or whatever with your teachers and specialists, or even a weekly email from them is a lot better, I think.
That's great. Did you grab that, Kim? So we can talk about that a little bit further. So what Felicia's saying is exactly what I was hearing. And then it got to the point where people were asking me to delete them from my emails. And I was like, well, don't you want to know if there's no school? I was like, okay. Yeah, so parents became very overwhelmed.
And it's already happening, honestly. You know, I'm having a hard time, you know, so I only have 2 kids now. I was so excited. I'm like, yes, I don't have to deal with the college guy's emails because he's super independent. So I don't need to get his anymore. And then now I've already had, you know, art and, you know, science, and the art didn't go over to my son's account, you know, so we're already doing that again. So I'm sure it's going to ramp up, and I know it's a jump and it's a learning curve, and it's, you know,
it's nerves too. It's nerves.
It's a lot.
Our teachers are really nervous that they're going to miss something.
Of course. The communication is big, right? Communication right off the bat. Everyone should have heard from someone at this point, whether it was one therapist or one teacher, or you should have heard from someone. So if you're not, that's a flag, right?
That feels better.
Yeah, so
I got stuff in the mail originally, and then I reached out to the team, overloaded from the high school, blowing my mind. Like, I'm overloaded from that. But I had the same problem, Bonnie, that like art stuff wasn't whatever, you know, like I'm trying to get things set up and catch up with everything, and it's just not
Yep.
It's just
Okay.
not.
So we'll get there. I think that's just the, we appreciate it, Paula, because I think it'll be helpful if we all kind of think
Yep.
about what's the best way to capture all those specialists.
Well, at least you're confirming the emails too that I got, so that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
My mind is already going as I'm hearing this because it's such good feedback. And I'm thinking even for the staff, they probably would like a better tool too, because that's a lot of phone calls for them and that's a lot of
Yeah.
people for them to reach out to. And so one of the documents that we use this year when we first started the remote, we wanted to have a way to document some data. And so we were using these Google tools where teachers were going in and they were, letting us know when they talked to parents and, when they saw the student. And, it was great for us because if a parent called us, we could get in there and we could see that form and we could see what kind of communication had happened. It'd be interesting to see if maybe we can find something that's similar that parents could go to and their students' information would be there. And it's just thinking about how to make sure it's confidential. So we'll start thinking about it, and I'm sure we have some tech savvy people out there that can guide us.
Okay, great. So, I mean, I think this, just want to pause for a second. I think this meeting is fantastic.
Mhm.
It's obviously not going to be the last one, right? So I think that's one of those things, like, you'll go back to the drawing board and, we'll reach back out to you and move to that next plateau, that next landing where we've escalated to opening and now we've escalated to, launching the micro-hybrids and then, coming back as a CPAC and, with the Leominster Autism Project and partner with you again to, get some more family feedback. I think that would be great.
I love this forum though. This works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's good too, that bottom up mentality where, like, listening to and hearing the experiences from the families and what they're going through and even coming up, they have lots of solutions too. So just kind of working out what works best and for everybody, I think it's a good start. I hope people keep showing up to listen to these and to provide their own input, because I think it helps the whole mission as a whole.
You have a lot of people in the chat who haven't heard from anybody.
I haven't heard from any specialists or anything yet either, which is kind of crazy to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I was
real quick, I'm just saying this platform, I think, especially for the CPAC or whatever, is really nice because as we see, we have kids and we all know how hard it is to get to a meeting, and we might have more parents that can get to a meeting if we do it like this because it's easier.
Yes,
great.
I know. I'm very excited about it. Bonnie and I actually have talked about it a little bit. We said even as we move forward and there's opportunities to have maybe a presenter come or to do some face-to-face, it'd be nice to be able to have parents that, are going to be able to do it remotely. Just like you said, not having to worry about getting a babysitter, not having to worry about going out. And so I definitely think we're going to be taking advantage of this platform again.
And no snow days.
Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah, so we do have more slides. We do have a whole section about inclusion. So, that was just micro-hybrids. We didn't forget about the inclusion families.
Right. I'm
So-
wondering if we should kind of,
Let's skip over this.
I know that's a big one, but I think you can probably paraphrase that.
Yeah,
too
so let's
in a
just
minute.
skip. So,
Yeah.
go back one slide because I really like that one. So,
Sure.
compensatory is, doesn't mean you're eligible just because your kid didn't get speech last year. The compensatory services mean, where's the gaps? Where is your child struggling? What do we need to get them back to base? Will the regular service delivery cover that, or do you need extra? And that's going to be a collaborative effort between, parents in student, monitoring and evaluation and the district. So, I think it's confusing. I think compensatory is very confusing because you immediately think, oh, I'm owed that. Not necessarily. So, one of the great sites, again, Mass Advocates for Children, they held a compensatory meeting.
A webinar type thing.
Yep, a webinar, and they record everything. So between them and the Federation, they have a ton of videos, and they're great. And they really talk about, what does that look like? They use the DESE guides, they use the law, and then they use practical, application. and what to expect. And so I would just urge everyone, when they want to learn more about compensatory, go to the Mass Advocates for Children, go to their website, or go to their Facebook page, because their Facebook page has a lot of videos. And and then also, obviously, you're going to talk to the district, you're going to talk to your teachers. It's a two-way conversation. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because it's confusing. So go to DESE, look at the compensatory guide, learn the timelines, get informed, and then you'll be ready to sort of pivot on that when we reopen, in a week. But obviously, for us, therapies never start in the first week. I never get my speech first week. The kids are getting acclimated, schedules are being established. So I know people are nervous because they didn't hear from their specialist, but I think you're going to, right? So Kim, what would you say they should be nervous? Week what?
I mean, I don't think that there's any reason to be nervous. I know that people are working on that. I think what's important is that those specialists that have kids that have really hefty IEPs, those are the ones that they're, making sure that they're contacting those families and giving that information. That doesn't mean that student who gets the inclusion support, it just might look different just because they know already. We already know that student's going to be sitting in front of a teacher. We already know there's a plan for that kiddo. We can reach out to that family and let them know how we're going to continue to support them, whether it's going to be a tutor joining or a para joining, or the special ed teacher partnering and co-teaching. They just feel more confident about that. So that might be why you're not hearing right away. But you can imagine, I will tell you, our speech therapists have 100 kids on their caseload. That's a lot of families to reach out to for just one speech therapist. They have help, they have their SLPAs and whatnot, but really the parents don't want to hear from the SLPA. They're okay with them working with their student and providing those services, but it's really the speech therapist that they want to hear from, or the occupational therapist. So they have very large caseloads. And scheduling, that's what they really want to make sure that when they're talking to families, they have a really good sense of what their schedule looks like so that they're not promising something that they can't deliver. We've asked them to be really thoughtful about our students that are coming in for the micro-hybrids, because we want them to have that face time with the, we've sent all that information out to the specialists so they have them in front of them. Even if a student has speech, let's say, twice a week, they might only be getting it speech once when they're in the micro-hybrid face-to-face, and the other one might be a remote. So they're thinking about all of that. It's a lot. Scheduling is hard. They're much better at it because they've been doing it for years, but you can imagine it just looks very different right now. So we really appreciate your patience as we build those programs.
All right, perfect. You want to move on, Steph?
Sure. We'll get through all of this super quickly because I do want people to be able to ask their questions.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I know we've talked a lot about students in the separate classroom, and it's a very different beast than inclusion students. And I know there's a lot of people that are concerned about, how their needs are going to be met. And, basically, this was also, I think, from DESE, if I remember correctly. Oh no, Mass Advocates. So, these were some ideas on how to accommodate those. Let me move you guys. I don't know where to put you. To how to sort of make this happen. And they gave some suggestions on how to sort of make sure the accommodations and things are being met. If you want to talk about this a little bit of, I guess there's no question necessarily, it's just more, or there is, how will one-on-one in inclusive setting be handled?
Again, that kind of goes back to almost the same question we had before. I think, again, it's going to just be individualized. What we saw a little bit happening in the spring was that sometimes that para or tutor was sitting in the group and not doing much. That's not a good use of that person's time. The student's not getting, there's a better way to use that staff member. And so thinking about what is that student's biggest need, and I'm sure that they have better answers about what that will look like. But again, I think it's going to be maybe that one-on-one being supported when the students are doing independent work. It might be 3 or 4 kids invited to work together with one paraprofessional or one tutor. I don't know, Nicole, if you want to talk a little more about that, because you've been working with staff around some of that scheduling, whether there's some things that you've seen that you want to share with us.
Sure. So I know that we've talked a little bit about some of these tutors and paras having their own Google groups so that they're in the inclusive setting for the whole group lesson as they would typically. And then when they're in the classroom, they would move them to the back of the room and have a small group to either review the lesson again or do the activity with them. So one of the ideas that the teachers were having was doing just that in the remote, being in the Google Classroom with the classroom teacher, and then having their own separate Google group to bring that small group to again reinforce the lesson or do the activity with them in much smaller, you know, whether it be 5 students, 4 students. So that was one of the ideas that everyone seemed to really latch on to, so that we can make sure that they're getting that extra reinforcement of the content.
I guess the concern on that is that some parents have is then, you know, students are going to miss the other instruction. You know, you don't have, I've seen like a few schedules. There's not a lot of room for, that I can see on that one-to-one. So, I mean, does that look, so I know my son doesn't have any really big breaks, you know, and he's in the 8th grade. So does it look different and like a smaller child? I see Paula's hand. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those schedules are a little bit deceiving in the fact of, we've said to teachers, you're to teach, like almost like your mini lessons, and then we want the students to actually work. So the teacher will not be teaching for a full, say if it's a 60-minute block or a 55-minute block,
Okay.
there might be a lesson for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then students need to engage in some type of task. That's when the teacher can go off, pull her small break-in groups or push out to a group, and the one-to-ones and the tutors can do that as well. We're really trying to make sure that if kids have to look at a screen for 6 hours a day and just be talked to, that's not how we're hoping this thing goes. So there will be time within each one of those classes where teachers can break off and go do other tasks.
Okay, and that's something like, so is that something that every principal or every teacher's been taught, like told that? And
yes, every teacher, regardless. So a lot of the, because one of the pieces is we do worry about people's, their bandwidth, we worry about their programs, we don't want to just have children staring at a screen, and we want students to work. You know, it shouldn't be all teacher lecture, it needs to be student engagement and some high quality. So the teachers were thrown off by that at first too. They said, what am I going to talk about for 60 minutes? So no, you're doing your typical lessons, and then you're engaging in small groups throughout the class, or students close their screen, come off and say, hey, we're all coming back in 25 minutes. So they go do their thing and then they all come back. So there's a lot of that in and out throughout the day.
I think that's what's not clear for a lot of people. And I think kids are interpreting their schedules literally. So I don't know if that can be something that is a small video that sort of calms kids' nerves.
Yeah.
And parents' nerves. Because I think a lot of people are worried about that.
Yeah, we just clarified that with the teachers too. I mean, they typically have these schedules, and I kept saying, what have you been doing all these years? But no, it does make sense. I think they felt that they had to just keep talking. And I said, well, when are kids going to work? So no, do your lessons. And then Google now is having the breakout sessions. They've put in a lot of those features that Zoom has, but we feel they're a little more protected for students. So we have the ability to tag into all of those, and the staff got trained on all of the aspects. So it really does help now. Yes. So, but that's a great suggestion too, Bonnie.
Yeah, I think that, you know, I just think everyone's sort of anxious, right? Like we finally got the schedules, people did the meet and greets, so that calmed them a little bit, but then they're still nervous. Like I'm hearing from, you know, different parents, they're nervous about attending for that long of a day. I assumed there would be breaks, but it's not assumed if you don't see it or hear it, right?
Right.
And I guess another question, was, hang on, I saw a parent. What kind of training or support will we be able to give to the parents who have, you know, they're working, so they have someone else providing support for their kids? You know, are we going to have some kind of a workshop or some kind of guidance where we can, you know, partner with a group of parents, you know, to kind of guide them on that journey, because it's very, very new?
I was thinking, Bonnie, more about like the types of technology, or maybe if we're introducing a new resource, that how will parents be able to use that? Especially like, I think that some of the new things that I was talking about, the Teach Town and the Seesaw, actually one of the features that we are offered is some parent training. That's part of the package when we do it, whether it's videos that we're sending home to families. I mean, we're trying, I think it's hard during the day to try to bring everybody together, but I think definitely as a district, we've talked a lot about the people in our district that have great talents that can do little videos for families, for training, for, hey, we've got this new tool to use, here's a video on how you can open that up. We've been doing it for each other, even in our little special ed department. There were some new tools, and some of us are just much better at them than others, and so we've been making our own little videos on this is how you can access, you know, this resource, here's a way that you can use this tool. We found it to be really successful, and people can look at it when they have time to look at it. So I do think that we are going to be doing more of those things for families.
Okay.
The IT team has already started making videos, and literally we've gone back to, how do I turn this Chromebook on? What is the icon that my child should be looking for? We also have this one sign-on called Clever. So parents need to understand that kids are going to sign on once and everything's going to be at their fingertips, instead of having to try and get in and out of all these apps. And we set up a parent help desk. It's the same help desk situation that our staff uses. So if something's not working or your app isn't showing up, it's easy to get a hold of somebody in IT. So the parent piece is, it's coming in drips and droves because we're trying to ramp our kids up, but then the parents will say, I don't even know where to plug this in. And it's true. It takes a little while, so it's good. It's coming.
Do you have some kind of a, you know, like a placard cheat sheet? Because sometimes the computer's not going to turn on, so we're not going to be able to put in a ticket.
Correct.
So we're going to need to call someone, or not everybody can follow a video. And so they need that little guide, you know, that just
little job aid.
Print out and follow along. We'll have those.
Yes, and when in doubt, just call your school secretary. They know who to get a hold of if anything were to, you know, crash or you just get fed up, because that's going to happen. And then just call and we will get somebody to help you out. So it doesn't always have to always be virtual. We can make phone calls. We'll do whatever we need to.
Yeah, I just think that students and parents would really benefit from just something they can print out, because a lot of students are going to be independent, right? Yep. You know, and most students have a cell phone, or will have a parent in the house to supervise using the cell phone, right? Or you know, someone watching them. So they might independently be able to solve their own issues, but they just need a guide. Yeah. You know, something simple that you print out and you put next to your, you know, I at work, I'm sure you have one like I do. It's a little sticker. It's on my computer. Yeah. You know, having a problem.
All my passwords on it because I can't remember those either.
Well, that too. But I think those little things, you know, in the remote setting that you would use in work, kids need too.
Yeah.
And let's see. So the inclusion questions. Another inclusion question is, you know, I know a lot of the schedules are sort of set, right? Like middle school used to rotate and now it does not. Right. So are therapists going to look at that so they're not always pulling a kid from their math session?
Yes, yes, for sure.
Okay.
That's a no-no in our world.
But it becomes complex because you have such a big schedule.
Right, and they've cut our hours and our times and, oh,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm just trying to scroll through. It was the supporting the other people. You can move on, and I'll capture them at the end.
Okay, and we answered this question here about will services be offered outside of the micro-hybrid, and the answer is yes.
Yes.
you should hear from someone about that. Oh, which is perfect segue to technology. I think Bonnie, you had this one too. Whoops.
Yeah, I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on it. I mean, we know that in terms of the Chromebooks, we've seen the principals send emails and say, you know, communicate right now if you need one now, or if you can wait till the next rollout. I know I've seen surveys, and if parents haven't seen the survey or an email from their principal, please, you know, get in touch ASAP. And then I guess the question is, if kids didn't make it to the meet and greets today, when I know some people got Chromebooks or whenever their meet and greet was, how are they getting the, you know, what's the process?
Yeah, I was at the high school actually today, and some kids were, they had staff that was manning the desk where the iPads were, and some kids were there for their meet and greets, and other kids had, you know, they were just coming to the door, they had somebody monitoring the door, they were only letting in so many students at a time. And so it was going quite well. And so people were just coming and picking them up, and they may not have been their meet and greet time. So
okay. Are they scheduling that?
Flexible.
Yeah, it's been, we've tried to do a schedule, but we're trying to be as flexible as we can, because kids are working, mom and dad are working, or maybe grandma can swing in. As long as we know who it is and we can identify, we're pretty much just going off the cuff. The schedule helps us to make sure we have enough staff to pass things out. But if a student shows up, we know we need to get these in their hands. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that happens.
Okay. And Kim, I know there was going to be some delay on the iPads because you needed to get some of them programmed and purchased. You know, how do we look?
Yep, they're purchased. That's already been done. As a matter of fact, I talked to Steve Maloney the other day, and he's waiting to hear back as to when the delivery is going to take place. There is going to be a little bit of a delay. We already knew that when we put the order in. It didn't go in too long after I talked with you and Stephanie. So the next step is going to be identifying the students that need that device. And I think I may have said this before. I apologize if I'm repeating myself. You know, we don't want to put up any roadblocks. In the past, we've always done an assistive technology evaluation to determine the best tool. Right now, we don't have time to do that for everybody. And it just seems like a roadblock to me. I think our teachers and our related service providers really know their students best, and they're going to be able to make the best recommendations for them. And we're going to trust them that if they're saying to us, my student is going to be able to access the curriculum better with this type of technology, we're going to pay attention to that. And that's going to be, we're going to have a small tool that they're going to use just so that we can document that we had input from a specialist in regards to those tools, but we're going to try to, you know, make it a very fluid and no roadblocks.
Okay, great. And I think we kind of did our touch on this, but we're going to need a lot of training, a lot of training opportunities. And I think it has to be both day and night, because everyone works different shifts. You know, we have first, second, third shifts. So, you know, we need to capture the parents when they're available. So, you know, any way that we can do pre-recorded trainings, or, you know, just have someone they can reach out to, again, that quick reference guide. Another technology-ish question is, if a teacher is in the Google Classroom and decides it's time for a break, how will a parent know that's really a break? You know, like, you know, or, you know, you have a sitter watching your kids. It's not your kid, you know, it's your sitter is watching, or you've hired a nanny or a tutor or someone. Is there something on the screen that's going to tell parents or anybody that the kid's in a break and should come back at X time? Is there a visual?
That's a really great suggestion.
Really good question.
Well, you know, I have it at work. I'm in a phone queue, and I have a board that everybody knows what I'm doing. So I have a board that says I'm on a break. You know, you're not going to find me at my desk or in the queue because my flag is on a certain ticker, or I'm in a meeting, you know. So I visualize the same thing in Google Classroom somehow to let people know visually what's going on in the class, you know. And that visual for a kid too, they're ticking down to this lesson, helps them stay on task. So I don't know how we can embed those kind of visuals for not just the kid, but whoever's helping the child.
Right, and I know that when our classrooms, when we were doing face-to-face, those were some tools teachers would use. They'd have a timer on the wall, or projector timer on or use some of those tools. And
They're
I'm sure there's
huge.
ways to continue to do that. But yeah, that's a great suggestion and something for us to throw out to our staff to consider.
Yeah, and I don't know that a Google Classroom does that, but maybe there's another application that could be launched at the same time.
Yeah, they can put up a slide on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, anything to help, because, you know, that's what a couple parents are saying, you know. They're not the ones who are going to be there every day.
Right.
Some parents are, you know, co-oping.
Yeah.
And I think any visual on that screen will really, really help.
Anyone, actually anyone, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's not just for a kid with an IEP.
Right.
Adults and any
Mhm.
student, really, you know, that helps you stay on task.
Right.
Plus, it also helps you get through that lesson if it's not a lesson that you're really into.
Right.
You know, if it's something you're not interested in, or it's not a desired lesson. I remember doing that in high school or elementary. You're looking at the clock, you're like, yes, you know,
How much
I
time
can
left?
engage for 10 more minutes. I got this.
Yeah.
We've got a few stories about students doing that for sure.
So, you know, let's see, busing. Yep. I know for the kids in the hybrids, I know I got a busing
Yeah.
letter, but I honestly don't know, what does the bus look like?
So for all of our students who had specialized transportation on their IEP, we're using Vanpool. So those students will still be on a smaller bus. The bus companies have been really thoughtful and have plans for how they're going to transport students. Vanpool was way ahead and had started putting some plans out to us, and they'll be sharing them with families too. And then the students who did not have specialized transportation on their IEP, we're still offering transportation to them. And that will be from first students. So when we sent out the forms, we just wanted to know, because not everybody's feeling comfortable with having their child on the bus right now. Some parents want to transport, and we totally understand that. So families are getting back to us. We've already got quite a few in the last couple of days, our transportation forms. Our out-of-district and transportation secretary is handling all of that, because she's the one who's used to sitting in front of those transportation questions.
Okay.
So, yeah, we're feeling pretty confident about that. I think we asked people to get everything back to us by the 11th, and if we haven't heard from some families by then, we'll be reaching out to them to make sure that they can get those forms to us, because the bus company will not transport without us providing.
Right. Jasmine, we're going to hold off to the end. We just got to get through these slides. Okay, sorry. So one of the questions you may or may not have answered, but I just want to ask it again. So the first student drivers are, you know, especially for the special ed kiddos, are those the drivers we already had, or did they have a turnover also because of COVID?
They've had some turnover. So I think they retained a little bit over 50%. But they really try to keep their special ed drivers. It really is a safety factor with students, and they love their drivers, right?
Yes.
So it really helps with the transportation. So those drivers seem to be a little bit, they stay more. So we're working with them around that. But I mean, people don't realize how important that consistency is for kids. They like their drivers.
Well, there's a gap too. I know, you know, I've learned, so, you know, with Sabrina being in the district for, you know, 13 years, I know to call for a student, because her info doesn't always get there. Where there's some kind of, you know, sometimes there's a breakdown and her health plan information doesn't make it over. So now we're going to have, you know, but we've always had familiar people.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not really been a big issue. At least one person on the bus knew my kid, whether it was the monitor or was the driver. So my concern is, you know, how do we bridge that gap? It's more critical now than ever, right? Especially with the high complex kids taking the bus.
So we still have Kim Booth working with us right now. So she's establishing all that, and she's got a really nice connection with them and does a nice job. So yes, and then it's still the same thing, one child to a seat unless it's a family member. And then they've put cleaning protocols in place between all rides, and they're asking that students wear a mask or some kind of face covering just as an extra precaution. But Kim is working with first student to just shore up all of that information. And we have a little bit of time to see where that goes as well.
Yeah, I guess the question is, what if, back to the, if your kid can't tolerate a mask, are they
Right.
going to be allowed on the bus?
Right. So some of the buses had shields put up around seats. So in case that's an issue, so that would be
Okay,
an
that's good.
accommodation there.
Okay.
Wow.
I don't think we have any other questions about busing, do we?
Just, I guess, just like if, like anytime, if you decide to drive your kid in initially, if somebody chooses and they want to change their mind, they would contact Kim about that.
Yes.
Right, you just contact our office. It does take, and parents can certainly have that option, and we expect that parents are going to change their mind. We just need 48 hours. That's what the bus company, usually it's quicker than that, but they typically say to us, you know, if you have a new student that's joining us, we have to make some changes on the route or whatever. It may take 48 hours for them to get that set up.
Okay. Yeah, that's good
Parents
to know.
certainly,
Okay.
if you feel like I'm not comfortable with the bus, or gee, things are going well and I'm ready
Right.
to use the bus company again, it's always an option.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you. Ah, the moment we've all been waiting for.
I am just going to run through real quick a couple of questions in the chat before we sort of just let everyone jump in if they want to raise their hand. Let's see, hold on. So we already talked about the deadline for IEPs. I mean, the state, I mean, you already talked about that, Kim, where, you know, the state rules are not laxed, but you obviously have to play catch up. So that will just involve a lot of communication to the families and everyone getting on the same page.
Yep.
And so parents don't feel ignored or skipped.
Agreed.
And then people should be hearing from the PTs and the OTs soon. In-person evaluations will be allowed. Let's see that one. One question is, you know, we do have a fair number of kids who have attention deficit. You know, they're not going to be able to attend, and their parents want to make sure that they do have the opportunity to get into those breakout sessions, and you know, that they have a smaller work setting for their child. You know, how do parents, can they start talking about that now so that they start off on the right foot?
Yep, I think so. And I think, you know, it's interesting because when I was talking with my cohort, that was one of the biggest things that SPED directors are getting feedback about, that parents were talking about their students with ADHD and how difficult it could be for them to attend and what were some strategies that worked. So we're really going to be listening to how other people are, their successful moments and their tools that they're using for students, but parents are obviously going to be witnessing a lot of that too. So yes, we want to hear about it because there may be some things that we missed and they can talk to us a little bit, and we might have some great strategies that we can share.
Okay, perfect. And then if parents haven't heard about meet and greets by now, they need to reach out now, right? They should have already heard about meet and greets at this point.
Correct.
And then what if, you know, if someone's remote and they do have a one-to-one aide or they do need one-to-one supports, are we having discussions to allow staff in homes, or is that still a restriction?
Yeah, at this time, we're not going into homes. I think it's just right now it's still a safety issue. Our school committee has also recommended that not be an option right now. I think there's just too many unknowns, and so at this time, we're not.
Okay, but then I'm assuming that the family could partner with you and staff to work on a way to facilitate a one-to-one session with the child to establish navigation and routine. Like sort of a more, you know, individualized instruction, right, to navigate them a little bit more in those breakout sessions.
Right. And I think we started doing some of that. One of the things that, one of our stumbling blocks in the spring was not having that time with those parents and tutors and being able to teach them some of those skills. We had some parents and tutors that have been working with us for a long time, and they were very independent and knew how to support students and had partnered with teachers. We had hired actually quite a bit of staff after the beginning of the year, so we had some new staff in front of us, and they just didn't have that skill level. So that's why we've been spending some time with them and having them join us for our professional development so that they can start thinking about what are some of the strategies that they can be using independently. This is very different for them as well, because they're used to being in the classroom and having, you know, the teachers sort of model those prompts, model those behaviors tutors for them. And now we're asking them to do some of that independently. So I think there's a little bit of a learning curve, but open to it, and they, they want to support, and they just need a little bit more guidance. So one of the nice things about our tutors is that they do have an opportunity to have a prep time, an opportunity to meet with teachers and to sort of get some feedback from them about, hey, I was working with a student and this just wasn't working. What other strategies could I be using, or what other tools could I be using for students?
Right, great. Well, I think that's everything from the chat. It seems like we've covered everything. So I guess, Stephanie, you want to open it up to?
Sure. I don't know how we should do this exactly, but maybe
raise your hands, or
yeah,
go around as we see hands raised if anyone has a question.
Or if you don't want to be on camera, maybe just put your name in the chat and we can call on you.
Yeah.
And you can always, if you want, to leave some things in the chat and email them to me. I'm happy to respond and make them available to families. I think one of the things that I want to be able to provide in the way of communication is, now that we've got our webpage up, is putting more information on there. And I had a parent who said, I was looking for a place where I could gather that information and get the links and get the supports. And I really want that to be something that's really user-friendly, that parents are like, oh, I'm so glad that I have a place that I can go to get this information. I think a lot of the technology information, the new information, is going to be there for parents to access, so we'll start directing families there. It's been hard for us in regards to communication too, because things kept changing all the time. No sooner would we have an idea about what we wanted to share with families, and a week later it was like, oops, nope, it looks this way instead. So our goal is not to confuse families either. We want
something. We're going to have those resources, and those will be district level staff members. So the K-1 virtual teacher will be for K-1 throughout the district, because we have common curricula now, so it's easy enough to do.
Awesome. Anyone else have questions? Looking around for a hand, or I don't see anything else in the chat room.
Oh, looks like Caitlin or
Caitlin?
Rob.
Yep.
Hello. So my son's on an IEP. The question is, if he's absolutely drowning 3-4 weeks into this, at what point are these children going to be called back? Hybrid model. If they're just not keeping up.
Yeah. So your first step is going to be, you're going to want to always talk to your student's liaison, the special ed liaison, and have that conversation. A team meeting is sometimes the best way to pull everybody together and to talk to all the people who best know the student, and to hear what the parents are having challenges with, so the team can come up with some solutions. And, I think as we move forward and we're able to have more students in front of us, we're going to have more options to be able to bring students in who have different kinds of challenges. It's just going to be a little bit slower process. We're doing it all around student safety, community safety, but you just need to talk to us about it. And for some families, they've already requested, I need a team meeting to talk about some of the challenges that I feel like I'm not getting the answers for. Well, it might be time to have the team come together and kind of problem solve. So I would always start with the liaison, who might just be able to say, wait a minute, we did have some success with this certain activity. I'm going to go reach out to a few people and get back to you about, here's another resource that we could be considering.
Yeah, don't wait till it gets so big. As soon as the problem starts to happen, reach out, get the help, get the support. Don't let it get to a point where your child is beyond just, a frustration level. It really becomes a problem. So the coordinators are available, Kim is available, and the liaison's in the building. So just keep communicating with us.
Yeah, we had a parent reach out to us whose student wasn't even on an IEP over the spring with some attention issues, and was really anxious, just really anxious about the whole process, was just having a hard time paying attention. And we ended up having the student meet with a counselor just a couple of times to talk it through and to talk about some strategies. And that student was able to work much more independently and much better. They just needed somebody to sort of guide them and sit and talk with them. So, sometimes we have some other resources and tricks in our back pocket that we can share. So please let us know.
I think that's really key is, talk to the teacher, if the kid has an IEP, talk to the coordinators. If there's no IEP, then you know, talk to the teacher and the principal and whoever else is support staff, guidance. Those are all good resources. And then obviously, Kim, you're always available. Paul, you're always available. So if parents feel like they're not being heard, you know, I know Kim and Paul have always been very responsive, you know, and they're, you know, talking to parents and sort of trying to work that out. So they can help bridge that gap.
Yep. Just let us know.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Bonnie and Kristen, for putting all of this together. I look forward to another opportunity down the road as things grow and change and we have more students in front of us. I think that there'll be more questions for sure.
And I'd love to meet, if possible, sooner rather than later in the same format, because, you know, it is going to change very rapidly and hopefully for the better. But if we don't hear from you and too much time passes, that's when problems occur. So if you can organize it again, I know it's a lot and everybody's really busy, but I think this format's great.
Yeah, no, you know, definitely will.
Great,
yeah.
I appreciate it. And we can work on topics or bring in speakers or, you know, different professionals that might be able to help answer some of those questions for us as well.
Yeah, I think too, one of the things that I think would be helpful just in our community is just to have some regular communication from the special education office to kind of let us know and include us in the conversation of like what's going on, you know, what training is happening, what are some resources that we can, you know, participate in, what are some trainings that we could do, or just, you know, the goings on about, and as we start to navigate through this fall. You know, I don't know, like Paula, I know you put out your email every week. I don't know if Kim would be up for that, or, you know, something like that. Just even if you're not sure about what's going on, just to say, hey, we're working on this. We're not sure where we're going to get, what we're going to get, or whatever. Just kind of, I think that would take a lot of the stress away and the unknown in terms of parents.
I think the format that I would like to use is to be able to use the website to put some of that information on. It's very interesting when I send out my emails to because the district-wide, because of course when we send out our emails, you know, we don't have a system that identifies which students are that have an IEP, and at the same time we want to make sure all parents get the information, because they may have a foster child with them, they may be taking care of a sibling or that has special needs. So when we ever put out information, we like everybody to have it, but people get so confused, it seems like, when those emails go out. Why did I get it? Whatever. So trying to think about a format that will work. So I'll be thinking about that. So thank you for that.
Sure. I think Kate wanted to ask a quick question, and I guess we'll end on that.
Great.
Hi, thank you. I don't really have a question. I just wanted to make a comment as a parent. I have 3 children in the school system, 2 of which they're twins and they're both on IEPs. And I really just want to share from a parent's perspective, this has been a very difficult time. My children are in a sub-separate classroom. When they're in the classroom, they are broken into a small group and have support. And then to go from having to come home and do work independently when they don't do work independently at school has been really difficult, on top of the fact that I work full-time. I work for DCF, so I have a very high stressful job. I'm a single parent of those 3 kids, and so I really want to express as parents, this is very difficult, and to feel like you have to be on top of your kids and help them do the work for them to succeed is really difficult while maintaining your own job. So I really just want to express that this is very challenging. I'm very saddened by how this school year is going to go, and the regression that my kids have already had. So I just wanted to put that out there as a parent, that I'm really, really struggling.
Yeah, and I think it's important for us to hear that and to remember that, you know, we do have our families are struggling. Our staff is struggling too. They've had to learn, you know, a new way to do things as well, and they're worried about their students too. And we're just going to hope that this pandemic that things change, that things are healthier, and we're going to take advantage of that. When things are looking good, that's when we're going to be trying to get our students in front of us. So we don't want you to feel so stressed. We don't want to feel so stressed. We certainly are much happier when our students are in front of us, for sure.
I just want to add, Kate, over the summer, I held a few CPAC support groups for parents. And, you know, I know Jasmine's nodding because she came. Melissa came, I think, once, you know, or twice. And we just chatted, you know, and it just felt nice to connect, even like this, like the Brady Bunch. You know, we're all chatting. And I think, you know, we're going to hold some more of those. Didn't want to overwhelm people with everything else going on and throwing in a support group, but probably either the end of next week or the one after. I'm going to throw one on the calendar. So, you know, we can connect and make sure we're capturing everybody's schedules. And we can hold a variety of support groups. If people are available during the day, we can look for a host for the day and people can host them at night. But I think it's going to be critical for parents to stay connected. And, you know, through the CPAC and through the Autism Project, Leominster Autism Project, I think, you know, we really want to keep that support going. And we can all share best practices and ideas too as families. You know, what are we doing? What's working? Or just...
Sometimes with the support group, what's great about that is I know even for ourselves, when we get overwhelmed about something and we get perseverated on, this isn't working, when we start to meet with other like people who have like jobs with us and we hear their story, not that just that misery loves company, but people do know ways to say, have you thought about this? Have you tried this? Have you thought about just thinking about this a little differently? It definitely makes things better, for sure. So I think parents being able to talk together is going to be really helpful.
I agree.
And Kate, if there's something specific that will help you in your situation, reach out to your teachers, at least let them know specifically what you're going through, because at least, you know, it's in their hands at that point, because, you know, I think it's going to be a learning experience as the year starts, but the more they know up front, the better. And, but you definitely want to get the help that your kids deserve, and to make your life easier as a parent, and, you know, just to make sure, to get the support. And so, yeah, I think those two things hopefully will be helpful. So just keep that open line of communication with your coordinators and the kids' teachers, and let them know specifically, like, I need this, I need that. I assume, you know, the coordinators on here, that's, you know, what you need to hear in order to kind of, you know, navigate through everything. But thanks for saying that, Kate.
No, thank you for sharing. I know that's not easy. You know, it's not easy to speak out and to share. And so we appreciate it because you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'm at that point, you know, it's hard.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everybody. It was a longer meeting than we anticipated, but I think there was a lot of ground to cover, and I think there's a lot still to be said. And I think we would like to touch base in a couple of weeks just to see where we're at. I mean, I don't think it'll be nearly as long of a meeting, but maybe, I know we're going to jot some things down and then follow up. So I hope everybody will come back. We won't take your entire night like we did tonight, but if we could have done things better, can you guys just let us know? If, you know, if there's questions that pop in your head when you're laying in bed at night thinking like I do, you know, just jot them down, shoot an email to, I mean, obviously the school department, whoever you think needs to hear it, or if you feel comfortable reaching out to us, we're always open to. So, but thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Staff, parents.
Yes, we appreciate you all coming on. It's super helpful.
Yeah. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Sleep tight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.